Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
So I'm Dr. Rabia from Department of Physiology, and we will be taking endocrinology, all 4 lectures this week as well as next week online, because Prof. Suni, he has some other commitments, so he's not able to take the lectures. Therefore, the department has decided to take these 4 lectures of endocrinology online. So today, as well as next week on Tuesday, we will have 8 to 10 class online, inshallah. So I already shared the lectures with the group leader. So I hope every one of you is having the lecture slides with you, right? So you can see the shared screen.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, okay, let's start our lecture number 1. Uh, so in the endocrine lectures, in all 4 lectures, we are going to discuss various hormones. And the of the hormones, their actions, what is their mechanism of action, and how the levels of the hormones are regulated. And then we will specifically talk about the thyroid hormone. So the hormone is defined as a chemical which is released from endocrine glands. So the glands in our body are of 2 types, endocrine and exocrine. The endocrine glands are those glands which secrete chemicals, and these chemicals will enter in the blood, and through the blood they are carried to different target organs. Whereas exocrine glands are those glands which are having ducts, and they produce their chemicals which never enter the blood. For example, the salivary gland, which produce saliva. Saliva enters in your mouth. It doesn't enter your blood. Similarly, sweat glands, they secrete sweat, and sweat also doesn't enter your blood. It is secreted on the outer surface of the skin. So endocrine glands are different from the exocrine glands because first, they do not have any duct, and second, they release the chemicals which will enter in the blood. And these chemicals, which are released from endocrine glands, they are known as hormones. So the secretions of exocrine gland, you will not call them hormone. Like saliva is not a hormone, sweat is not a hormone. Hormones are those chemicals which are secreted from endocrine glands, and they will enter your blood. So the properties of the hormones are that they are transported usually in the blood. So blood is the transport medium to take the hormone from site of production to away to other target cells on which the hormones can act. So they travel some distance to the target tissues, and the target cells, they have specific receptors. So for each hormone, there is a specific receptor, and it is unique in its structure and in its chemical properties, and only a specific hormone can bind to that receptor. So each hormone has a specific receptor. So it is the example, you can take the example of lock and key mechanism. Like in your house, you have a number of rooms. Each room has its own specific key, and you can open that room only with that specific key. The other bedroom key will not open the room, that room. So for just like each lock can be opened by a specific key, in the same way, each receptor can bind to a specific hormone. So there are specific receptors for the hormones, for each hormone on the target cells, and the presence of the specific receptor on a cell will make it a target cell for the hormone. So how does a hormone will know that this is my target cell and I have to act on this cell? Due to the presence of specific receptor. If specific receptor is present on that cell, the hormone will act on it, it will bind with it, and it will produce actions. But if specific receptor is absent on that cell, then the hormone will not bind, and it will not produce any effect on this target cell. So the target cells have specific receptors, and each hormone has its own specific receptor. For example, insulin hormone has its own insulin receptors. Testosterone hormone has its own testosterone receptors. So the insulin hormone cannot bind to a receptor specific for testosterone. So each cell, each hormone has its own specific receptor, and then they regulate the cell reactions to produce biological effects. Now, there are different ways to classify the hormones, and one of the ways is to classify them based on their chemistry, based on their solubility. Are they soluble in water, or they are soluble in lipids? So if a hormone is soluble in water, it is known as hydrophilic. So hydro means water and philic means to love. So hydrophilic hormones are those hormones which love water, and they are soluble in water. The examples are catecholamines. Now, what are catecholamines? I have written in at the bottom of the slide that the catecholamines are epinephrine and norepinephrine. So you might have heard about these names, epinephrine, norepinephrine. They are released from sympathetic nerves as well as from adrenal medulla. So they are chemicals. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are the chemicals which help us to fight against stress, any stressful situations. And because of their chemical nature, they are grouped together as catecholamine. So catecholamines, they are hydrophilic, they are soluble in water, and peptide hormones. The hormones which are made up of peptide chains, they are made up of amino acids. These hormones, they are also hydrophilic. Then second type of hormone, second class of hormone is that which is lipophilic. Lipophilic means they are fat soluble. Lipo means related to lipids and philic means love. So lipophilic hormones are those hormones which love fat or which love lipids. So they are fat soluble. And the examples of fat soluble hormones are thyroid hormones, the hormones which are secreted from the thyroid gland. And we will discuss these hormones in today's lecture as well. And the steroid hormones. Now, what are the steroid hormones? The steroid hormones are those hormones which are derived from cholesterol, and the examples I have written in the bottom, like sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and the hormones from the adrenal gland, they are all steroid. So this is one of the way to classify the hormones based on their solubility, whether they are water soluble or they are fat soluble. So in the water soluble or hydrophilic hormones, we give the examples of catecholamines, which are epinephrine and norepinephrine. And second example is peptide hormones. For example, insulin hormone, growth hormone, glucagon, etc. And in the lipophilic hormones, we give the examples of thyroid hormones and steroid hormones. Steroid hormones examples are estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, etc. Now, why it is important to know whether the hormone is hydrophilic or it is lipophilic? This is important to know because the mechanism of action of a hormone depends on its solubility. And for what will be the location of the receptors, it also depends on the solubility. So for a hydrophilic hormone, which is soluble in water, the receptors are located on the surface of the cell membrane. What is the composition of the cell membrane? Cell membrane is made up of what? Any student? What is the composition of the cell membrane? Or cell membrane is made up of what?
Lipid bilayer.
Yes, good, Manar. So lipid bilayer makes the cell membrane. So that means if a hormone is lipid soluble or fat soluble, it can cross the cell membrane. But if a hormone is hydrophilic, it is soluble in water, but it is not soluble in lipid, then such a hormone will not be able to cross the cell membrane because cell membrane is made up of lipids and only lipophilic hormones can cross the cell membrane. Hydrophilic hormones cannot cross the cell membrane. So their receptors are located on the surface of the cell membrane. So hydrophilic hormones bind with the receptor in the cell membrane. Now the receptors are located on the cell membrane, and once the hormone binds with its receptor on the cell membrane, it will cause activation of a second messenger system because the hormone itself cannot enter inside the cell. It cannot cross the cell membrane, which is made up of lipid, to convey the message inwards inside the cell. It will hire certain messenger which will carry the message of the hormone to the inner side. Now these messengers, they are different types of chemicals. Sometimes calcium ions, for some hormones, calcium ions act as a second messenger. For some hormones, there are G proteins which act as second messenger. For some hormones, there is adenylase cyclase. So there are different types of second messengers in different cells. So these second messengers are hired by hydrophilic hormones because hydrophilic hormones cannot enter the cell. So they hire second messenger system. So how would they hire? First step is binding of a hydrophilic hormone with its receptor. which is located on the cell membrane. And then this binding will cause activation of second messenger system. And second messenger system, when it is activated inside the cell, this will cause alterations. Alterations means changes in the pre-existing protein activities. So already there are some proteins in the form of enzymes or channels, etc., in the form of pumps, etc. There are proteins inside the cells, and some of them are in active state, some of them are not active. So the second messenger pathway, once they are activated, they will change the protein activities. They may cause the stimulation of the already existing proteins, or they may cause inhibition of these proteins. So in this way, by changing the protein activities, a response will be produced in the cell. So this is the mechanism of action of a hydrophilic hormone, whereas lipophilic hormones, they are soluble in lipids, so they can easily cross the cell membrane. So their receptors are located inside the cell. So the location of the receptor for lipophilic hormone is different from the location of receptor for hydrophilic hormone. For hydrophilic hormones, the receptors are located on the surface of the cell membrane because the hormone cannot cross the cell membrane. It is water soluble, it is not lipid soluble, so it has to stay outside. It cannot cross. Whereas lipophilic hormones, they are soluble in lipids, so they can easily cross the cell membrane. So their receptors are located inside the cell, maybe in the cell cytoplasm or even inside the nucleus, because the nuclear membrane is also made up of lipids. So lipophilic hormones can easily cross the nuclear membrane as well. So the lipophilic hormones themselves, they enter inside the cell because they can easily cross the cell membrane, and they bind with the receptors which are present inside the cell. And this binding will cause activation of messenger RNA, which is present inside the nucleus. So this messenger RNA will be activated, and this will cause synthesis of new proteins. So new proteins will be synthesized, and these new proteins will then produce the cell response. So in this slide, you can appreciate the difference in the mechanism of action of hydrophilic and lipophilic hormones. So the first difference is in the location of the receptors. The receptors are located on the cell membrane for hydrophilic hormone, whereas they are located inside the cell for lipophilic hormone. Then a hydrophilic hormone causes activation of second messenger pathway, but there is no activation of second messenger pathway in a lipophilic hormone because lipophilic hormone doesn't need a messenger. It itself can cross the cell membrane and enter inside. Then there is changes in the pre-existing protein activities in case of hydrophilic hormone, whereas lipophilic hormone leads to the synthesis of new proteins. So these are the differences. Now, if you know which hormones are included in hydrophilic hormone, in the previous slide, we told you that the examples of hydrophilic hormones are catecholamines like epinephrine, norepinephrine, and the other example is peptide hormones. They are the hydrophilic. So for catecholamines and for peptide hormones, this is the mechanism of action, that their receptors will be located on the cell membrane. It will cause activation of second messenger system, and there will be alterations in the pre-existing proteins. Whereas the examples of lipophilic hormones, they include thyroid hormones, and they include the steroid hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So for these hormones, their receptors will be located inside the cell, and they will cause activation of messenger RNA, which will lead to the synthesis of new proteins. So these are the differences between mechanism of action of the hormone. So mechanism of action of the hormone is dependent on its solubility. If it is fat soluble, the mechanism of action is different. But if it is water soluble, the mechanism of action is different. Now, how the plasma hormonal concentration is regulated. Each of us, all healthy individuals, they have a normal level of various hormones. We have a normal levels of insulin, normal level of growth hormone, normal level of thyroid hormones. How the hormone levels are regulated? What prevents the hormone levels to become too high or to become too low? So the main mechanism of regulating the hormone concentration is controlling the rate of secretion of the hormone. So when the hormone levels begin to increase, the secretion rate will decrease so that it doesn't increase. And when the hormone level begins to lower, this will increase the rate of secretion of that hormone so that its levels come back to the normal. So the rate of secretion of a hormone is the main mechanism by which the levels of the hormones are regulated. And how the rate of secretion of a hormone is controlled? It is controlled by a feedback mechanism, which is called negative feedback. So I believe that you already have studied what is a negative feedback and what is a positive feedback in the first unit of physiology. Do you know what is a negative and what is a positive feedback? Any student? Do you know what is a have you been taught about negative feedback and positive feedback before?
Yes.
Okay, so what is a negative feedback? Do you know?
I'm not sure, but I think it's if the hormone become lower, the gland give me more hormone.
Yes,
That's what I think.
very good, Yusuf. Thank you. He is right. So in a negative feedback, if your initial stimulus and your end response, they are in opposite direction. For example, Yusuf gave us an example that if the hormone levels are low, so the stimulus is the low hormone level. So he said that if the hormone levels are low, then the secretion rate will be increased. So when the secretion rate is increased, this will increase the hormone level. So your initial stimulus was a decrease in the hormone level, and in the end response, you are getting an increase in the hormone level. So when your initial stimulus and the end response, they are opposite in direction, this is called a negative feedback mechanism. Whereas in positive feedback mechanism, your initial stimulus and your end response both are in the same direction. So what is a negative feedback? In which the response is in the opposite direction of the change. So if the change is a decrease in the level of the hormone, and in the end, the response which you are getting is an increase in the level of the hormone. So both are in opposite direction. The change was a decrease in hormone, and the response you are getting is an increase in the hormone level. So both are in opposite direction. So this is called negative feedback. And the purpose or the objective or the aim of the negative feedback is to maintain a constant hormone level, and it is the primary control system. So although we have positive feedback also, but the primary mechanism to control the levels of the hormone is a negative feedback. So this is giving you the example. On the left side, you can see the negative feedback, and it is most common. And if there is an increase in the hormone, this will lead to a decrease in the rate of secretion from the gland, which will lead to a decrease in the level of hormone. So the initial change in the beginning was an increase in the hormone, and the end response which you are getting is a decrease in the level of the hormone. So your response is in a direction which is opposite to the change. So this is a negative feedback, and this happens most commonly. It is the primary mechanism to control the hormone levels. And on the right side of the slide, you can see the positive feedback. So positive feedback is not very common. And the example of positive feedback is that if the hormone levels increases, this will further increase the rate of secretion from the gland, which will lead to a further increase in the level of the hormone. So your initial stimulus was an increase in the hormone, and in the end, the response is a further increase in the level of hormone. So your initial stimulus or the change and your end response, they are in the same direction. Both are increasing. So this is an example of positive feedback, but it is not very common. Most common is the negative feedback in our body. So in our body, there is an area which is known as hypothalamus. So hypothalamus secretes, hypothalamus is an area in the brain. So it secretes a hormone which is known as hormone number 1. And hormone number 1, it acts on the pituitary gland, the anterior pituitary gland. and it will stimulate the pituitary gland to secrete their hormones, which are hormone number 2. And these hormone number 2 will go to other endocrine glands, and they will secrete their hormones, which will produce their effects on the target cells. Now, if this is the endocrine axis, so hormone number 1 is controlling the rate of secretion of hormone number 2. Hormone number 2 is controlling the rate of secretion of hormone number 3. So if hormone number 1 is it is increasing, the hormone 2 will also increase. When hormone 2 increases, this will lead to increased secretion of hormone number 3. Now the hormone number 3 has a negative feedback effect. When the hormone number 3 increases in amount, it will cause inhibition at the level of pituitary as well as at the top level. So the hypothalamus will be inhibited and pituitary gland will also be inhibited. So this will lead to a decreased secretion of hormone 1 as well as a decreased secretion of hormone 2. Okay, so in the endocrine axis, this is how the levels of the hormones are regulated, that if hormone 3 levels, when they are increasing, they will inhibit the production of the hormones from the pituitary as well as from the hypothalamus. So hormone 1 and 2 will decrease. When they decrease, then the rate of secretion of hormone 3 will also decrease. Similarly, suppose the person the levels of the hormone 3 becomes too low, then what will happen? This will stimulate the anterior pituitary and it will also stimulate the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus will secrete more hormone 1, which will lead to more release of hormone 2. So this will lead to more release of hormone 3. So this is how the endocrine axis works. Now we move to the thyroid gland. It is a small gland which is present in our neck, and you can see the shape of the gland. It is the butterfly shaped or the necktie shaped. It is having 2 lobes, and these right lobe and the left lobe, they are connected to each other through a narrow band. And hormones which are secreted from the thyroid gland, they are known as thyroid hormones. And you need 2 chemicals for the synthesis of the thyroid hormone. One is iodine and the other is tyrosine. The tyrosine is present inside our body. You do not need to take it from your diet. It is synthesized inside our body. But iodine, you need to make sure that your diet is having enough amount of iodine in that. Otherwise, if you are deficient in iodine, this will lead to decreased levels of the thyroid hormones. So the chemicals which are required for the synthesis of thyroid hormones, they are iodine and tyrosine. And 2 types of thyroid hormones are produced. One is called T4 and the second one is T3. T4 means tetraiodothyronine. That means that 4 molecules of iodine have been combined. They have been attached to the tyrosine. Whereas in T3, 3 molecules of iodine are attached to the tyrosine. So we have T3 and T4 as the thyroid hormones. The main function of the thyroid hormone is to control or regulate our basal metabolic rate. So in basal metabolic rate means the rate of metabolism when you are at rest. When you are not doing any activity, then your rate of metabolism is regulated by the thyroid hormone. And when the thyroid hormone levels increase in a person, his basal metabolic rate will also increase. And as a result of metabolic reactions, heat is produced. So if thyroid hormones levels are high in a person, the basal metabolic rate will also increase, and the amount of heat which is produced in that person will also increase. And in these metabolic reactions, the oxygen is consumed, oxygen is used up, so oxygen consumption will also increase. So if thyroid hormone levels are high in a person, he will have high basal metabolic rate and he will produce a lot of heat. So he may complain of heat intolerance, like he will say that winter season, I'm comfortable in the winter season, but summer season is too difficult for me to withstand or to bear the summer season. I feel too much warmth because his inner body is producing too much heat because of high rate of metabolism due to high thyroid hormone levels. But if a person is having low levels of the thyroid hormone, he will have a low basal metabolic rate. The amount of heat produced will be also very low in his body. So he will feel cold because his body temperature will be low. So he will feel cold and he will complain that I feel too much cold when in winter season. If a normal person if a normal person has to wear a single jacket, a single he has to take a single blanket to keep himself warm. The person who is having low levels of thyroid hormone, he will complain that I have to take 2 blankets, I have to take 3 blankets, or I have to take wear double jackets to keep myself warm because winter season is too much cold for me. So why he's feeling that much cold? Because his body is producing less heat because he's having low basal metabolic rate. Then on the nutrients, on the food which you eat in the form of fats, proteins, the thyroid hormone will cause breakdown of the fats. When the fats are broken down, fatty acids are released. Thyroid hormone will also cause breakdown of the glycogen. Glycogen is the stored form of glucose in our body. So that glycogen will be broken down into glucose. And the proteins will also be broken down into amino acids. So thyroid hormone is causing breakdown of these nutrients. And as a result of breakdowns, energy is released. So if a person is having very high levels of thyroid hormone, there will be more breakdown of the nutrients in his body. He will produce more energy in the form of ATP. So he will be super active. He will be hyperactive because he has too much energy in the form of ATP in his body. Plus, he will lose weight because all the food which he eats, it is metabolized and energy is released from them. As compared to him, if you have another patient who is having low levels of thyroid hormones, so very low level of thyroid hormone means the food which he will eat, it will not be broken down and it will not be metabolized and it will be stored in the body in the form of fat stores, protein stores. So his body weight will increase. Plus, when the food is not metabolized, the energy is not released. So he will have less energy. So he will be lazy, fatigued. He will not be that much active. So he will be feeling tiredness or exhaust. He will be exhausted all the time because his food which we eat is not metabolized and it is stored. Also, he will gain weight because the food is stored in his body. Then for the development of the brain, for the development of the neuronal cells in the brain, and also for the skeletal growth, the thyroid hormones are important. So if thyroid hormone levels are low in a newborn baby, and it is not diagnosed and he is not given any treatment, then his brain development will be affected and his skeletal growth will also be affected, and his height will be less than the height of his age fellows. Then another function of thyroid hormone is to increase the target cell responsiveness to catecholamines. So what are catecholamines? In the previous slides, I told you in the examples of hydrophilic hormones, we gave the example of catecholamines, and in the bottom of the slide, we wrote that catecholamines are epinephrine and norepinephrine. So the epinephrine, norepinephrine, or the catecholamines, they act on the heart. They increase the heart rate and they increase the the force with which the heart is contracting. So catecholamine increases the heart rate and they increases the strength of contraction of the heart. So thyroid hormones, they will increase the responsiveness of the target cells to the catecholamines. That means the thyroid hormones will increase the sensitivity of the heart or responsiveness of the heart to catecholamines. So in the presence of thyroid hormones, the catecholamines will have more effect on the heart. So if a patient is having high levels of thyroid hormones, his heart will be more sensitive to the catecholamines. So he will be having a increased heart rate and he will be having a very strong contraction in the heart. But if a person is having low levels of thyroid hormone, then the heart will not be that much sensitive to catecholamines. As a result, the heart rate will be low and the force of contraction of the heart will also be less. So the heart rate, if the thyroid hormone levels are more, then the heart rate will increase, strength of contraction of the heart will also increase, and the respiratory rate will also be high if the thyroid hormone levels are high. Then in the thyroid hormones are, they play a role in fertility. Fertility means that ability of a couple to produce babies. So if husband as well as wife both have a normal levels of thyroid hormones, then they can produce the babies. But if any one of them is not having the thyroid hormone levels are not normal, for example, in the wife or in the husband, then it is very difficult to produce baby. And also the normal menstrual cycle in the females. To have a normal menstrual cycle in the females must have normal thyroid hormone. If some of the females, if they have very high levels of thyroid hormone, or if they have low levels of thyroid hormone, their menstrual cycle will become irregular. Now how the thyroid hormone levels are controlled in our body. They are under the control of the hormone, which is known as thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. So TSH is the short form or abbreviation of thyroid stimulating hormone. And this is a hormone which is released from the anterior pituitary gland. And TSH, it will control all the steps in the formation of thyroid hormone. So there are different steps in the formation of thyroid hormones, because we said we need tyrosine and we need iodine molecules. So initially to produce T3 and T4 in the end, it's a complicated process and there are different steps involved. First the iodine is oxidized, then it is taken inside the thyroid cells, where it is combined with the tyrosine. So there are different steps involved. So all the steps which are involved in the synthesis of thyroid hormone, they are stimulated by thyroid stimulating hormone. So from the name of the hormone, you can imagine what will be the function of this hormone. So if the name of the hormone is thyroid stimulating hormone, so that means obviously it is stimulating the thyroid gland and it is controlling the rate of secretion of the thyroid hormone. So this is the pituitary gland. So in this pituitary, you can see my cursor, right? So this is the pituitary gland, and in this you can see the two parts of the pituitary gland. The right part, which is darker red in color, this is the anterior pituitary, and this anterior pituitary secretes a hormone which is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. But this itself is under the control of another hormone from the brain, from the hypothalamus, and this hormone is TRH. So number one, you can see their numbers are written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the number one hormone, the hormone number one is TRH, which is released from the hypothalamus, and it goes to the anterior pituitary gland, and anterior pituitary will then secrete the hormone number 2, which is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which will go to the endocrine gland, which is the thyroid gland, this butterfly shaped endocrine gland in our neck. So the thyroid gland will produce hormone number 3, which are the T3 and T4 thyroid hormones. Now these thyroid hormones, they will act on the target cells, as well as they will inhibit the secretion rate from the anterior pituitary to decrease the rate of TSH, and also they will inhibit the hypothalamus to decrease the secretion of hormone number 1, which is TRH. So this is the feedback control of the thyroid hormones. So you can see the arrows, they are of two different colors. You can see the green color arrows and you can see the red color arrows. So red color arrows are showing the inhibitory effect, whereas green color arrows, they are showing the stimulatory effect. Now, when you know what is the function of the thyroid hormone, you can imagine and you can tell what will happen if a person is having very low levels of the thyroid hormone and what will happen if a person is having very high levels of the thyroid hormone. So low levels of the thyroid hormone is known as hypothyroidism. So what is hypo? Hypo means less than the normal. So when the thyroid hormone levels are less than the normal, it is known as hypothyroidism, and it can occur in children as well as in adults. So if it happens in children, it is given a special name, which is called cretinism. So cretinism means hypothyroidism in the children, and it is usually at the time of the birth. Whereas in adults, it is more common in females. So in cretinism, the children are hypothyroid usually from the birth. And in adults, there are some diseases which are more common in females, some diseases are more common in males. So hypothyroidism is a condition which is more common in females. So what happens in cretinism? Cretinism is hypothyroidism in the children, and usually they are hypothyroid at the time of birth. So these children they will suffer from dwarfism. So what is dwarfism? When the height of the child is short, when he is short stature, he cannot, his height is not according to his age. For example, he may be 6 years old, but from actual age, maybe 6 years, but from his height, he looks like a child who is 3 years old. So such type of children who are shorter than their age, who have a short stature, they are known as dwarfism. So if a child is suffering from cretinism, he will be short statured, he will have dwarfism, plus he will be mentally retarded. So mental growth, the growth of the brain, the development of the brain will be affected. So his brain will not be as intelligent and sharp as of his other age fellows. So there will be mental retardation. Plus, there will be general symptoms of hypothyroidism. So what will be the general symptoms, which we just discussed, that the thyroid hormone increases the heart rate, increases the force of contraction of the heart. But if a person is hypothyroid, so his heart rate will be less, his force of contraction of the heart will be less, his metabolism of the nutrients will be less. So the food will not be metabolized, it will be stored in his body. So he will gain weight. So these are the general symptoms of the hypothyroidism. They can occur in adults also. They will be decreased BMR. BMR is basal metabolic rate. So we said that the most common function, the most important function of the thyroid hormone is to regulate the basal metabolic rate. So if a person is having low levels of the thyroid hormone, he will have decreased BMR or decreased basal metabolic rate. Then he will be intolerant to cold. He will have cold intolerance because he's having low BMR, so low metabolism, so less amount of heat will be produced in his body. So his body temperature will be less than the normal. So he will feel cold. So there will be cold intolerance, plus he will have weight gain because food will not be metabolized, and his pulse will be weak and slow because pulse indicates your heart rate. So his heart rate will be low. So because of that, his pulse will also be slow and less. He will have poor memory because the brain development is affected by thyroid hormone, and also he will speak very slowly. So in severe cases of hypothyroidism in adults, there may be edema or swelling or puffiness of the face, hands, and feet. This is called mixed edema. So in adults, there will be symptoms of the hypothyroidism, like he will have low BMR, cold intolerance, weight gain, slow and weak pulse, poor memory. Plus, he may have the swelling or puffiness of the face, edema, hand and feet, and this is called mixed edema. Then hyperthyroidism, the condition in which the thyroid hormone levels are higher. Hyper means more than the normal. So in hyperthyroidism, there are different causes of hyperthyroidism. One of the cause is, which is the most common one, it is the Graves' disease. So in this disease, the person immune system produces antibodies which are known as thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, TSI. So TSI is the short form of thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, and these thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, so as the name indicates, their function will be to stimulate the thyroid gland. So these immunoglobulins or these antibodies, they stimulate the thyroid gland to produce more and more thyroid hormones. So in such patient, when more and more when thyroid gland is stimulated more and more, the size of the thyroid gland become bigger. So there is enlarged thyroid gland. This condition is called goiter. So what is goiter? It is the enlarged thyroid gland. Plus there will be high basal metabolic rate because he is having high levels of thyroid hormone. So his basal metabolic rate will be high. So as a result of high basal metabolic rate, more and more heat will be produced in his body. So he will have heat intolerance. Plus his eyes will be pushed outward. They will be protruded. They will be more widely open. And these eye signs, they are called exophthalmos. Then he will sweat a lot. There will be increased sweating in his body. He will have increased appetite. He will lose weight because the metabolic rate is too high. So when any person is having high metabolic rate, then he loses weight. So they will have weight loss. Plus, their muscles will be weak because thyroid hormone causes protein breakdown. So when levels of thyroid hormones are high, their muscle proteins will be broken down. So as a result of breakdown of muscle protein, they will feel weakness in the muscles. Plus he will have palpitations. Palpitation means when the heart rate increases, the beating of your heart increases and you become aware of this increased heart rate. This is called palpitation. Plus they will be nervous and irritable because the activity in the brain will become it will increase. The neuronal activity will increase, so they will become irritable and nervous due to increased activity in the neurons. So if we will do the lab test, their thyroid hormone levels will be increased, T3 T4 levels will be increased, but TSH level will be low because when T3 T4 levels are high, they will inhibit the pituitary gland to secrete TSH. So TSH secretion will decrease, and there will be lab test will show that there is thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins or TSI, they are present in his body. So in this picture, you can see the exophthalmos, or the eyes which are widely open or which have been pushed in forward direction. So you can see the eyes are not normal. They are protruded in forward direction. They are pushed in forward direction. And why the eyes get pushed in forward direction? Because there is accumulation of fluid behind the eyeballs. So fluid accumulates or gathers behind the eyeballs, and this accumulation of fluid pushes the eyes to bulge forward. And in this patient, you can see the thyroid gland, it is bigger in size, enlarged. This is called goiter. And goiter means enlarged thyroid gland. It can be seen in hyperthyroidism as well as in hypothyroidism. And the causes of goiter is high levels of TSH. So whatever is the reason, if a patient is having high levels of thyroid stimulating hormone, so this will stimulate the thyroid gland to produce more hormones, and this will also increase the size of the thyroid gland. Also, if there is presence of TSI, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, which are present in Graves' disease, so this will also stimulate the thyroid gland to become more bigger in size and to secrete more thyroid hormones. So that's all about the first lecture. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no questions, we will have a 10 minutes break and we will then continue with the lecture number 2, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So we are back for second lecture. This lecture, second lecture is about the hormones which are play a role in maintaining normal levels of calcium. So we will talk about the hormones responsible for calcium homeostasis. The calcium in our body, it is distributed in various compartments, and most of the body calcium, 99%, it is present in the bones, whereas the soft tissues and plasma, it is having total about 1%. So 99% is present in the bones and 1% is present in the soft tissues and the plasma. So you don't need to memorize the number. It is just to give you the concept that most of the calcium is stored in the bones. So bones act as a storage site for the calcium. So 99% of the body calcium is present in the bones. Then the calcium, very small amount of calcium is present in the plasma. It is just 0.1%, and it is present in two forms. The first form is diffusible calcium. It is the calcium which is present in the form of the ions. And the second form of the plasma calcium is non-diffusible. It is present in bound form to the proteins. And it is the diffusible calcium, or it is the ionized calcium, which is regulated by the hormones. Now, why it is important to regulate the calcium levels, because the calcium plays a very important role in various functions of the body. For example, it is important for neuromuscular excitability. Your nerve cells and your muscles, like heart muscles, your skeletal muscles, your smooth muscles, all of them are excitable, means that they can produce action potential. So for their production of this electrical activity and excitability, the calcium ions are important. And for the contraction of the muscles in the heart, in the smooth muscles, the calcium ions are important. And for the secretion of various chemicals and for the secretion of neurotransmitters, the calcium is important. And it is also important for clotting in the blood. So there are 4 important functions of the calcium in our body: to control neuromuscular excitability, to control contraction in the cardiac and smooth muscles, to control secretion of the chemicals, and to control blood clotting. These are the important functions of calcium in our body. And blood calcium must be controlled, because if the plasma calcium decreases, this will increase the excitability in the neurons and in the muscle. So plasma calcium has an inverse relationship with neuromuscular excitability. If plasma calcium increases, neuromuscular excitability will decrease. And if plasma calcium becomes low, the neuromuscular excitability will increase. So there is an inverse relationship between plasma calcium levels and neuromuscular excitability. There are 3 hormones which are important in regulating the calcium metabolism, and the names of these hormones are parathyroid hormone. So in abbreviation or in short form, we write it as PTH. Then vitamin D. The chemical name of vitamin D is 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. This is the name of the vitamin D. And the third hormone is calcitonin. And in addition to regulating calcium, the parathyroid hormone also regulates the phosphate ions, and it decreases the phosphate ions in the blood. So these, the organs which are involved in calcium metabolism, they are the bones, because 99% of the body calcium is stored in bones. And then there are kidneys, because kidneys, they can reabsorb the calcium, or they can excrete the calcium in the urine. So by this reabsorption and excretion, the kidneys play a role in calcium metabolism. And then digestive system or gastrointestinal system, because the calcium which is present in your food, it is absorbed through the intestine. So these are the 3 organs which are important in maintaining calcium metabolism in the body. So first we will discuss the parathyroid hormone. The word para means adjacent, close, neighboring. So as the name indicates, it is parathyroid gland, means this gland is situated close or just in the neighbor of the thyroid gland. And where the thyroid gland is located, thyroid gland is located in your neck. And at the back of each thyroid gland, you will see small balls. So you can see my circle and the small ball. They are four, these small balls, they are 4 in number. 2 balls are present on the right side and remaining 2 balls are present on the left side. So these 4 small balls, they are actually the parathyroid glands. And they are 4 small glands located at the back surface of the thyroid gland, 1 in each corner. And the parathyroid hormone, or the PTH, the function of the parathyroid hormone is to increase the blood calcium level in the body. And it does so by acting on bones, on the kidneys, and on the intestine. Now, what is the action of parathyroid hormone on the bones? Bones are the storage site. Calcium is stored in the bones. So bones are the storage site for the calcium. So the parathyroid hormone will make the bones to release calcium. So it will cause mobilization of calcium from the bones into the blood. So calcium will be released from the bones and it will enter in the blood. Then on kidney, parathyroid hormone will cause to reabsorb calcium. So it will cause conservation of calcium. The calcium will be reabsorbed from the kidneys and it will signal the kidneys to eliminate the phosphate. So phosphate ions will be excreted in the urine. Phosphate ions will be lost in the urine, but the calcium ions will be reabsorbed. They will not be excreted. Calcium ions will not be lost. They will be retained. They will be conserved in the body. And also another function of parathyroid hormone on kidney is to cause activation of vitamin D. So activation of vitamin D requires parathyroid hormone. If parathyroid hormone is not present in a person, the vitamin D will not become active in that person. So for the activation of vitamin D, you require parathyroid hormone, and this step or this activation is taking place inside the kidneys. Then on intestine, the parathyroid hormone, it promotes the absorption of calcium and the phosphate from the intestine. But this action, this function of the parathyroid hormone on the intestine, it is exerted indirectly. This information will come in the next slides, that the parathyroid hormone, it does not act on the intestine directly. This effect to increase the absorption of calcium and phosphate, it is exerted indirectly through activation of vitamin D, that we will see in the next slides. So the action of parathyroid hormone on intestine is indirect through activation of vitamin D. So if parathyroid hormone activates the vitamin D, then this active vitamin D can stimulate the intestine to increase the calcium and phosphate reabsorption. So what is the overall effect of the parathyroid hormone? It will cause, it will mobilize the calcium from the bones, it will conserve the calcium by the kidneys, and it will excrete the phosphate, and it will absorb the calcium from the intestine indirectly through activation of vitamin D. So as a result of all these functions, the plasma calcium level will increase because calcium has been mobilized from the bones. The calcium has been reabsorbed from the kidneys, as well as the calcium has been absorbed from the intestine. So blood calcium level is going to increase. So parathyroid is therefore a hypercalcemic agent. Hyper means increased. Calcemic means more calcium in the blood. So hypercalcemic means it is causing increased calcium in the blood. So parathyroid hormone is therefore a hypercalcemic and hypophosphatemic. Hypo means less. Phosphatemic means phosphate in the blood. So parathyroid hormone is increasing the blood calcium level, but at the same time, it is decreasing the blood phosphate levels. So we say that parathyroid hormone is a hypercalcemic agent because it is producing hypercalcemia, and it is a hypophosphatemic agent because it is producing hypophosphatemia, or it is decreasing the blood phosphate levels. So what is the stimulus for the secretion of parathyroid hormone? So stimulus for the secretion of parathyroid hormone is a decrease in the calcium level. So if plasma calcium decreases, this will stimulate the parathyroid glands to secrete parathyroid hormone. And vice versa. Vice versa means that the reverse is also true. The opposite is also true. And what will be the opposite? The opposite will be that parathyroid secretion will decrease in response to an increase in the calcium. So if plasma calcium increases, this will decrease the secretion of parathyroid hormone. But if plasma calcium decreases, this will increase the secretion of parathyroid hormone. Okay, so parathyroid secretion is controlled by the calcium levels in the blood. If calcium levels increases, this will decrease the parathyroid secretion rate. And if the calcium levels decreases, this will increase the parathyroid hormone secretion rate. Now, hyperparathyroidism, if there is a tumor or a cancer in the parathyroid gland and it is producing more of the parathyroid hormone, then in such a person, there will be hypercalcemia. The plasma calcium will become too high because the patient is having high excess of the parathyroid secretion. So his plasma calcium will increase. And we discussed earlier that plasma calcium has an inverse relationship with the neuromuscular excitability. So when there is high plasma calcium, when there is hypercalcemia, this will reduce the excitability. This will reduce the neuromuscular excitability. So now the nerves and the muscles, they will be less excitable. And the rhythm of the heart will be affected. So cardiac disturbances can occur. And also there will be thinning of the bones. The bones will become thin and weak in such a person because this person is having high levels of parathyroid hormone, and parathyroid hormone causes the calcium to get mobilized from the bone stores. So calcium will move out of the bones. So this will cause weakening of the bones or thinning of the bones. And when the bones become weaker and thinner, they can fracture easily. Also, in this patient, there will be development of the kidney stones because this patient is having hypercalcemia, high calcium in the blood. So in the kidney, this high levels of the calcium, they will be filtered and they will get precipitated out in the form of the stones. So there will be kidney stones in such a person. Now, hypoparathyroidism or the low levels of the parathyroid hormone. In this patient, there will be hypocalcemia. Plasma calcium levels will decrease and phosphate levels will increase. So there will be hypocalcemia and hyperphosphatemia. So when there is hypocalcemia, the neuromuscular excitability will increase. And increased neuromuscular excitability means that there will be spontaneous generation of action potential. So the rate of production of action potential will increase and it will spontaneous. It will automatic on its own. And because of this increased neuromuscular excitability, the skeletal muscles can go into a sustained contraction, a continuous state of contraction in which there is no relaxation. This continuous state of contraction is known as tetany. I think in Arabic, it is called tashannuj. Do you know what is tashannuj?
Yes.
Tashannuj.
والدكتور
Yes.
again in
Uh,
Arabic
tashannuj.
تشنج okay
Okay, in which the whole body is in a state of contraction and the muscles get contracted. They are tensed, they are in spasm, and they are not relaxed. So this happens when the neuromuscular excitability is very high. And one of the reasons of increased neuromuscular excitability is hypocalcemia. So what happens when your muscles, all the body muscles, they undergo contraction and there is no relaxation? The breathing will be affected. The person will not be able to breathe or to take in air, oxygen. Air will not enter inside because you know that your lungs, they expand and they contract with the contraction and relaxation of the respiratory muscles. So there are muscles involved which will cause the expansion of the rib cage and expansion of the lungs. And when these muscles contract, this will cause going back relaxation of the and contraction, expansion of the lungs. But if the respiratory muscles, they are always in a state of contraction. For the most important respiratory muscle is diaphragm, which is present in your abdomen. So when the diaphragm contracts and it relaxes, this makes your chest cavity, this makes your lungs to expand and to recoil. The lungs increase in size and then they go back to their, they shrink in size. So with your breathing, when you inhale air and when you expire air out, your lungs are expanding and they are contracting, and your diaphragm, your muscles, main muscle of respiration, is also contracting and relaxing. But if the muscle is not relaxing at all and it is just contracting, there is no relaxation at all, and there is just the continuous or the sustained contraction, this will interrupt the process of breathing, and death may result as a result of respiratory failure because of sustained spasm of the respiratory muscles. The second hormone which is involved in calcium metabolism, it is the vitamin D, and it mainly acts on the bones. It acts on the intestine and it increases the calcium absorption. So this vitamin D, it is present in your skin, but the vitamin D which is present in your skin is not active. In order to activate this vitamin D, you need direct exposure of your skin to the sunlight. And once your skin is exposed to the sunlight, this vitamin D, it will get converted into another form, which will go to the liver. So the second step of activation is taking place in the liver. And the last step of activation is taking place in the kidney. So there are 3 organs in the body in which the activation of vitamin D is taking place. The first step is taking place in the skin. The second step of activation is taking place in the liver, and the third and the last step is taking place in the kidney. So after this last step has taken place in the kidney, now the vitamin D is fully ready to produce its effects. So active vitamin D is synthesized. First step in the skin, second step in the liver, and the third step in the kidneys. And if there is deficiency of vitamin D, this will decrease the absorption of calcium from the intestine. So no matter how much calcium is present in your food, how much milk you are drinking, how much yogurt you are eating, if your body is having deficiency of vitamin D, this calcium present in your food will not be absorbed from the intestine. So deficiency of vitamin D will decrease the absorption of calcium from the intestine. So when there is less absorption of calcium, this will lead to hypocalcemia, and due to which a disease is produced in the children, and the name of the disease is rickets. And in the adults, this disease is known as osteomalacia. So rickets is vitamin D deficiency in children, and osteomalacia is vitamin D deficiency in adults. The last hormone is calcitonin, and this hormone is a peptide hormone, and it is secreted from the parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland. So thyroid gland not only producing T3 and T4, but it is also producing another type of hormone, which is calcitonin. And this calcitonin, it has effect which is opposite to that of the parathyroid hormone. And the effect of calcitonin is to lower the calcium level in the blood by inhibiting the bone resorption. Bone resorption means bone breakdown. So calcitonin inhibits the bone resorption or bone breakdown. And by inhibiting the bone breakdown, by inhibiting the mobilization of calcium from the bones, it lowers the calcium level in the blood. However, the calcitonin, the role of calcitonin is not so important in calcium metabolism. Okay, do you have any questions?
Thank
So we have finished the thyroid gland, and we have finished the hormones like parathyroid hormone, the vitamin D, and calcitonin, the 3 hormones which are important in calcium metabolism. So by this, we come to the end of our lecture number 2. So next week also, we will have the online class boys and girls together, inshallah. So see you next week, inshallah. I will share the recording, and if you have any questions, you can contact me through email or through WhatsApp. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Massalama.
مع السلامة.